Okay, so let's not go ahead and waste any time. We are going to go ahead and set up our Unreal Engine 5 project, and then we're going to go ahead and just jump right in, start by getting our base metrics down and start working on our blockouts. So I'm sure that most of you know, you can get Unreal Engine 5 simply by wherever you always get Unreal Engine 4, there will be now an Unreal Engine 5 tab, and here you can go ahead and get the early access. This is a disclaimer. It is early access. Some things might change, although the UI and everything will most likely stay quite the same. There might be some bugs here and there, with like, for example, the new Lumen system. We will not be using the Nanite system for this. We will be using original techniques. And there is a reason for this, and this is because the Nanite system is specific to Unreal. However, if you want to get a job in the game industry, many companies do not actually use Unreal, especially AAA companies. They often have in-house engines, so they will need you to know traditional techniques. So I don't want to teach you techniques that you will most likely not be using. The only difference is that Unreal Nanite is high poly, but we have actually created one course on it, which is the Metro course. If you go to our profile, you can find it. In any case, over here, so when you go ahead and download Unreal and start it up, you can create a new project. We are gonna go ahead and we are gonna go for like just the games, and we're gonna probably go for like a blank project. I guess you can go for third person if you want, or we can go for first person. It doesn't really matter. So if you want, you can just import this one, and then you want to go ahead and want to set a project location. So for our project location, I'm gonna go ahead, create a new folder that I'll call Unreal in capital letters, and this is where everything that has to do with our Unreal Engine project will live. So I can go in here, do that, and I will call this, I would like to keep my name short because I already have a very long project location. And the thing is that Unreal has a limit of 188 characters, I believe, or 250 characters. And then it starts giving you errors. So let's call this Western underscore Toot. See, 130, that was the one. And that's why I'm telling you this. West underscore Toot. Yeah, so let's just do this. So yeah, it will be a bit of a silly name, but oh well. Target platform, we are gonna go for desktop. We are just focusing mostly on PC and console graphics. So we want to set the quality preset to maximum. And what we're going to focus on, so you just press create, is we are gonna go ahead and we will of course push everything a little bit more just for portfolio quality. Now it will go ahead and it will initialize over here. So that should all be totally fine. And then what we also have is, while this is loading up, is we over here, we are going to use Blender. A cool thing that's also new from this tutorial, I will hope that I do not forget to turn it on quite often, is that we will have key press. So whenever key I press, you will be able to see whatever I'm pressing in case I forget to tell you. So this is quite handy. For the rest, we are going to use the complete default of Blender. However, there's one plugin that I will be using, and this plugin is called the Maxivis Interactive Tools over here. Now, you can get this tool for free on Maxivis, vz.gumroad.com, and then you will be able to also find this. And it also has like some documentation if you want. However, it is quite straightforward. What I've done is I have added a Blender folder in your source files that has the tool in here. And in case you didn't know how to install it, is simply going to Edit, Preferences, and this is considered an add-on. So in here you can simply press Install, and then you can select your Maxivis tools. You might need to turn it on, however it will pop up, but you can also just type in Max, and here you can find the generic Maxivis tools, and you can turn it on. This will simply add this little window over here to the side, and that's it. This window is really great because it has like some very easy features like doing quick pivots and pivot editing, turning on target weld and a bunch of other stuff that, although they are really nice, we will not be using them a lot, but they will be there. Now at this point, as you can see over here, our third person scene has activated. We can also go ahead and we can play, and then you can see that over here we can just play just like normal and do whatever we want. Now this is quite nice actually, because we can also use this third person character right away for our scale reference. So what we're going to do is we are gonna go ahead and I do want to create a new scene. So let's get started by just doing some organization. I'm going to get started by creating a brand new folder, and I will call this folder Western Town. This is where all of our stuff will be located. All of this other stuff, it is just mostly Unreal stuff, but this is where we will have all of our assets. So let's create a folder. It's called assets. And by the way, if you do not see this content browser, it is down here. For this, I do expect that you already have a basic understanding of Unreal and how it is being used. And else I would recommend that you just watch a quick introduction, just like where the UI is and everything. For the rest, it's not too difficult. And there is some stuff that will most likely not be, it will most likely not be explained in like the introduction. Then, of course, I will just explain it to you. So we have assets. Right click, create a new folder. Textures. Right click, new folder. Materials. Right click, new folder. Saves. And let's stick with this for now. So in the saves folder, we will save our scene. For this, what we can do is we can go ahead and we can go to, let's do file and let's do a brand new level. Let's grab for now a time of day level because it already has like some handy lighting right away. Now for this level, we can go into our world outliner and there's a bunch of stuff that we do not need. We do not need these text renders, the material preview. We do not need the player start. We don't need, no, we don't. We don't need the floor. All that we want to have left is some of the lighting, which is our direction light and just our sky over here. Then what we can do is we can go to File, Save Current Level As, and this will be our final level later on. So Western Town, saves, and we are going to call this one Western Town Scene, and just press Save. Perfect. So we now got our base level set up. If you want to go ahead and you just want to always load up this level whenever you close down your engine, because I assume that you're not doing this entire tutorial course in one go. I certainly will not. Then we can go to project settings over here, to the side, and then you can go to maps and modes. And in here, you can find your editor startup map, which will be our Western Town, and our game default map, which will also be our Western Town. So this is quite handy. Now what we can do is it will just load up this scene. Okay, perfect. Now there's a few small things that I want to set up before we can get started by just creating our first walls. The first thing that I want to set up now is I want to already set up a basic terrain. This terrain will not actually have anything in it yet. It's just going to be like a very basic terrain that we might, or we will most likely remove and redo, or we can already use it. It kind of depends on how big our scene is going to be. The way that we're going to do this is we are going to go up here to activate our landscape editing mode. And then what we get is we get this massive green box over here. One thing that is very important that we need to keep in mind for this project is that I want to have a lot of geometry in my terrain in this area. And the reason for that is because I'm going to have everything from footsteps to cart wheels, to horse steps, to like dents. Everything is going to be in our terrain. And I want to actually have it as geometry because I want to really push the limits of what we can do with this. So knowing that, a cool trick that you can do to push in more geometry into your terrain. Right now your terrain is very, very large. And as you can see, the squares are not very small. This sort of corresponds with geometry. However, if we make our terrain insanely large, so we make it, for example, 255 quads and 2 sections. This is probably the large. No, wait, you can probably go even larger. But let's say that now we have this massive terrain over here. However, if we now set our scaling to, for example, 1 by 1 by 1, what you can see will happen is that it will become an incredibly dense terrain. So it will be a little bit more expensive. However, the terrain does have built-in optimization tools. And it will be a lot more interesting. So if we go 5 by 5 by 5, for example, here, see how big that is already? So 2 by 2 by 2 maybe. And I think 2 by 2 by 2 might actually be, let's do for the, just in case 4 by 4 by 4. And let's do that. I feel like this is big enough. The reason why I say that we will most likely remove it is because, as you can see, we don't really have a perspective of how large this actually is. You then go ahead and press create, and that will create our terrain over here. There we go. And at this point you can see that you can sculpt, but we can just close this. So this is our terrain. Now, as I said, I was curious how big this actually is. So if we go to create, shapes, and create a cube, and then in your cube, if you press the little button next to your transform, you can reset it to 0, 0, 0. So this cube is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. That's very good because this will also be our base scale. So as you can see, 1 by 1 by 1 meter, it looks like that our terrain might actually be a little bit small. But for now, that does not matter. So over here we have our cube. Now what I want to do is I just want to drag in my third person blueprint. Let's see, I think third person character. Or is it this one? I forgot if it was this. No, why? Of course it's not this one. This one over here. There we go. So here we have our character. So this is great because we can use our character to basically just run around. So I believe that we do not even need a player start for this. If we just go ahead and we now go and press play. Oh no, wait. So we do... Oh, I get it. So it automatically adds it in a player start. That's the thing with the third person character over here. But it does mean that it will still keep this third person character in here. So if I just do test... Yeah, see? Here. So it will just automatically drop in third person character. This is an engine thing. The engine will actually just do this for us. That's a bug. Okay, that was weird. But in any case, that is good to know. However, I still want to drag in my third person character over here, temporarily. And then if I just grab my cube over here, what I can do is I can grab this cube and I can scale it to be the size of like this character. Or maybe we can just, can we find the model maybe? It would be nice if I can just find the actual model, because it will be a lot cheaper. Third person mannequin, characters, mesh. I think this is, there we go. Let's do that one. So this is like the model that makes it a bit easier, because then I don't need to do my cube. I'm going to use this model for scaling. It's basically just going to be here so that I know about my correct scale. Because there's always like a little mismatch I find between Blender scale and Unreal scale. Even though everything is set to meters and it is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, it still seems to sometimes mess up. So, wall plane short and wall plane long. Now what we want to do is we now want to go ahead and go into Blender, and we will start by creating that. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to Shift A, go to Mesh and start with a simple plane. So this is going to be our wall, because it's just going to be blockouts. For our wall, right now it's a little bit of guesswork. I know that the height, so I can guess like if the person, let's say that this is 2 meters, this is probably around 4 to 5 meters. So let's do 5 meters. The length is something that I need to kind of like guess. I think what I want to do is I want to say 10 meters, just because I know from experience that we often need to go a bit larger in game than it would be in real life in order to make the perspectives work correctly. But you will not really actually notice that in game. So let's do short 5 by 10 and long 5 by 20. I think that's sort of like the general idea that I want to go for. So what I can do is I have over here, I have my plane. You sometimes might see me pressing the wrong buttons. This is because I'm currently working on a project in Maya and also a project in Blender. And that's the annoying thing. That when you switch, it's quite annoying to just transition over into these shortcuts. Now the way that I'm going to do this is, so we have this plane over here. We can go to item. And then over here we do have our dimensions. So right now it's 2 by 2. Or you can use your scale. It kind of depends. So these kind of correspond with each other. If I set this scale, I don't know which one, this is the X scale. So actually I need to go for the Y scale. If I set U to 10 meters, you can see here that this becomes 20 meters. So if I do 10 meters here, yeah, so we might actually want to go for 20 meters. Let's just see. So let's do 10 meters here and let's do 5 meters high. Yeah, see, that's what I mean. So we might actually want to double it inside of Blender. So if we go 10 meters by 20, which basically then it makes it easier for me to use this one because these values are a little bit easier to read for me. I know, it is quite large, we just need to see. We need to see. So let's say that we have this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Maxivis tools and I'm going to press Edit Pivot. This is very nice because now I can just freely move around my pivot and I don't need to mess around with all that weird snapping stuff that happens in Blender that I personally am not a big fan of. Now I want to snap this pivot to my corner. So I'm going to go up here to snapping and I'm going to snap it to vertex. Then when I move this, I can snap this to this vertex over here. And then I can press Edit Pivot again so that it is turned off. At this point, we can go ahead and set the location to 0, 0, 0, which means that this is where our pivot point will be. The way that Unreal reads is Unreal will always place your pivot point on 0, 0, 0. So all your models need to be on, you guessed it, 0, 0, 0. Now that we have this one over here, I will have a look if I need to go. Let's start with like 5 meters. Let's do a simple square to get started with. It's handy to keep it a square because then it is very easy for us to keep it tileable. Now, in terms of our organization, we need to always go ahead and we need to organize it in this way to keep everything nice and clean. We go ahead and we right click and create a new collection. Double click on it and give it the name of our asset list, which is plain wall short. This is why I gave so much attention to our asset list and the naming, so that we can correspond everything. In here, we can also go ahead and we can also keep track. For example, if we've done the block out, we can say /B. If we've done the final modeling, we can say /F. And just like that, we can just go ahead and get everything done. So you just want to go ahead and drag your plane into your plane wall short. Or you can, of course, right click, move to collection, plane wall short, whatever you want. We have our wall now over here. That's all we really need to do. We can go ahead and we can start by just doing a save as on our scene. And we are going to go ahead and we are going to save it in our source files. Let's create a folder called saves. And let's call this one structural pieces so that we have small props separately from this. Structural pieces and press save. We can now go ahead to file, export, and we want to export this as an FBX file. So in here, if we go ahead and let's create an export folder. You can export it directly to Unreal. I like to have it in this folder just because this is a tutorial so that people have an easier way of finding it. And you can go ahead and over here to Unreal, a folder. And in this one, call it once again the same as your scene collection. Do not call it different names, just keep everything the same because else it will become a pain later on. Turn on selected objects. It will remember you having this turned on for everything else. And then for our scaling, often the scaling needs to be set to 3. I know this does not really make any sense, but as I said, there seems to be a mismatch between Blender and between Unreal. Now I can dive into metrics and setting up specific metrics between the two programs to get everything correct. Or I can literally just set the scaling to 3 and be done with it. So make your life easy. So yeah, let's go ahead and press export FBX. And now what we can do is we can go into Unreal. And now if you go into your Western Town assets, we can go ahead and we can import this. So let me just navigate to the folder, exports to Unreal. Here's our FBX. And this is the nice thing. We can create a block out and later on we are just going to override this with our final version and it will automatically be replaced. So you just want to click and drag this in. And now there's a few settings here. Do not build Nanite. At least unless you want to use Nanite, but we're not going to use Nanite. We want to drop down and, very important, set the combined meshes, turn that on. Everything else is pretty much the same. Yeah, we don't need to really do anything else, so we can now go ahead and just press import. And there we go. So now we have our wall. What we can do with this is we can drag it in. And now we can go ahead and we can rotate it. So here we can see, for example, that our wall, I think we need to set this to 0.1 in terms of scale. So I think our scale is a little bit too much. Although we can also try and set the scaling in here. Normally it's 3. I can try and set the scaling in here to make it maybe a bit easier. It doesn't matter. It will remember all of these scalings. So let's set this to 1. export it again. Right click and press re-import. Here, see, so that it's still a little bit too large. Now, what we can do, so there is like a starter content in here. And this starter content, actually, now we can use this. 2, 1, 2.5. There we go. So that's pretty much the rough scale that we need to go. Don't worry, we are going to create a door frame next, and that door frame, and then we are going to create a window, and that will kind of like fit everything together. That's all we need to do. So for now, we can see this over here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and set my scaling down here. So if you double click on your wall short, you will open up the mesh editor. And if you go down to transforms, let's set this to 0.5, for example. It's a bit of a weird one. The scaling is behaving a little bit strange. But as you can see, so 0.4. Then we are just going to set the scaling inside of this one. So over here, in the end, the primitives will stay the same. We will have even spacing, which means that if we... Oh, no, wait. I'm doing this wrong. No, wait. I'm doing this right. I'm talking about grid snapping. I need to make sure that my grid snapping works. And 0.4 does give me correct grid snapping, so that's totally fine. Okay. Just test it out. Just press Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. And then you can go ahead and you can just move this around. And just make sure that everything kind of like fits together. I can remember in the past accidentally making a mistake with that, but that was actually something different. So right now, over here, we have something like this. If you want, we can actually make this even easier. We can go to Shapes, Cube. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. That's my fault. And I can simply set the cube to be 5 meters. So that I know... Here. So see? So I made a mistake after all. But I always like to leave in my mistakes as long as they're small. So if this is 5 by 5 meters, I can simply go in here and I can simply set my scaling to be exactly this. And then the metrics are exactly correct. So it looks like that we had to go for 0.5 after all. See? 0.5. So that was the correct metric. We just had to split it up into half. And that makes more sense. So... this wall is now correct. Everything that we import is going to be imported at 0.5. And now what we need to do is we kind of like need to guess how we are going to have our windows and everything like that. However, we will go ahead and we will do that in our next chapter.